if you recall, we were surveying in a sort of way of how man's mind must have what appears to be external sources of authority to ever have any sense of self-reference, the ability to do it, which is, in fact, as we have already proven mathematically, and according, at least by the decimal system, that this is absolutely imperative for the mind to ever be able to operate and to think. And moreover, we had sort of left off right at the point of considering that just verbal identification with these kind of external sources can be sufficient with minimal or even no actual involvement therein. Perhaps there's a foot or so past where we were, but not to worry. Who can remember where we were? Well, for instance, where we were sort of at the end, as I was trying to get you to consider in a way that is in no sense sociologically questionable or psychologically untoward, having to do with man, but the continuing historic forms of identification that people seem to have with the external world in specific areas that I'm calling sources of authority, institutions, but such as what might appear to be really silly is brand identification, team identification, the provincialism of city identification, state identification, nationality identification, etc. And even into areas that might appear to be, to some of your older generations thinking, areas that might not appear to be so open to any sort of judgment, and that is in the great world that used to be so important, like religion, that people can simply say, in a religious sense, that I'm a Jew, or a man can say I'm a Muslim, and actually not be a practitioner, and in many cases, it seems to be quite sufficient. If you, as being a freelance smartass, do not try to go in and upset the people. If you're just sitting back and being an armchair cynic, then the rest of life can press right along and people say, oh yes, I'm so-and-so. Yes, I would die for my country. And you go, wait a minute, I live next to this man, and I, for some reason, happen to have noticed I've been here 20 years, and I've been here every day, every time we've had an election, and he has not once voted. See, ordinary people think that has some pertinence. All right, that's about where we were. So I wanted to see if you could expand it a bit into the reality of what this is doing and the purpose it serves, because there is absolutely nothing ironic, there is nothing unsavory, there is nothing untoward about men saying that they're more identified or more involved with some external source, some external institution, than they physically are. Nothing. Now, at the ordinary level, as always, or I wouldn't even be bringing it up, there'd be nothing to talk about. As always, this kind of sort of intramural amongst humans fighting and people accusing one another of being hypocrites and etc., it does serve a purpose. But what I'm wanting you to see is the reality of the energy needed to run the human mind. When you take it a bit further, if you can get outside that kind of limited area of trying to just take the obvious judgment of, well, people out here saying one thing and doing something else. I mean, did you live 40 years? That is 5,040 years, you people from the Western world, of being intellectual. And some of you, I know for a fact, well, you told me you did, some of you finished several years of college. And you're going to tell me that after 5,040 years, that you have come to this major breakthrough that the world, that there are some people out there who say one thing and then seem to do, I hate to say it, seem to do something else. Oh, God. Some of you have the eyes of a cheap private detective, of an eagle There is simply no pulling the polyester over your eyes. All right, now past all that little point, I wanted to just make that clear that everybody can say that, but there's nothing new. There is, as always, something beyond that. And what is beyond that is what I'm trying to get you to consider. That there are these external sources, these models, these charts, these paradigms by which people are measuring themselves. And it's only people out there in that same kind of very crude game who attack one another verbally, forget physically, they attack one another verbally and point fingers and saying, you do not live up to the grand ideals of blank, being an Albanian, being a Buddhist, being a truck driver, that you have let us down. But beyond that, there is a greater level where there is no letdown. The sources of authority, think about it. You might ordinarily think, all right, being a college graduate, or let's get specific, being a graduate of Harvard entails, all right, here we go, let's be obvious. It entailed, since as far as I know they do not have correspondence courses from Harvard, that it physically entailed that you had to attend Harvard in person. But is that the basis, is that the identification, is that the external source of authority upon which humanity, that is, those who graduate, those who are impressed by it, those who only hire graduates from there, is that what is taking place? That is the physical attendance at Harvard for X number of years. Well, now certainly if they were on their toes, they require that you do that for them to ever give you one of those degrees. But is that what's involved? And to save you from having to go home and study this, I'll go ahead and answer it since I made up the question. And the answer is, I had it, damn it. The answer is no. Yeah, that's it, no. I knew it was one of the two. Yes, no, no. Rather than keep dragging you around the quadrangle there, let me leave and press on to what would appear to be perhaps a little more specific. But just consider that one little part, since I just kind of stuck that together here on the spot, that the connection between, even when it's required that there be physical involvement, which if you're alive, there's some kind of physical involvement, but the connection between the graduate of Harvard and Harvard is not the physical attendance thereof, and is not having the physical possession of the diploma, is not having the physical records proving that he or she attended, etc. Now, the bit more expansive and less specific, humanity's ordinary connection to all secondary activities is always more verbal than actual. Always. Such a blanket insanity, I was hoping would distract, as abstruse as it may have been getting about a graduate of Harvard's actual connection with Harvard, or a person who is a priest, and you would think, well, their connection to the church is that it took X number of years, however long it takes for them to fit you out for a dress. I mean to graduate from studying the Holy Writ. I just thought maybe I shouldn't. Do they actually go to those theological schools, those seminaries, for 5 or 6 years, or do they just get you there if you show any interest, and it takes that long for them to convince you, a man, to walk out in public and wear a dress? Maybe that's why it takes so long. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, I'm not an expert. But then back to the broader scope I was trying to paint you, is that in every secondary activity, and for a third time, there is no denying the fact that you're alive here in a 3D world, normally referred to as physical existence, and so everything you do has a certain what? Smell? No. has a certain physical reality to it. You people make some of the worst guesses. I guess you got your own views and you know what you're doing, but some of these guesses you make makes me wish I hadn't asked. Anything you do, as long as you are physically alive, of course, there is some physical aspect to it. There's no doubt about that, not right or wrong. But the wider view of it, where it begins to certain obscure minds, begins to reveal how life does make sense while everybody else is going, is that the connection to all secondary affairs, and by now you know what we're talking about. It's all anything other than, if it were still true, but we can describe it, anything other than silent sex, eating, and just staying alive, which is not sufficient. Anybody operating at that level is not truly a human. Not now. They haven't been for a long time. Hell, at least since 56, but thousands of years. Just long time. Thousands or even 10 or 20 years. So, anything you are doing nowadays is in some way beyond the physical procreation to keep the race going, the actual eating of foods, not dining, but the eating of foods to keep you individually alive, and the shelter that you must seek to keep your individual physical being alive for these few decades. But other than that, and in addition to that, everything you do now is in some way connected to the secondary world. So it's not a matter of trying to look around and saying, well, are we still talking about being a graduate of a school, being connected directly, or being employed by some religion, or being in some way identified or specifically connected to one of these external sources of authority or institutions. That's not it. Anything you do. Watching TV. What normally passes for thinking, the kinds of things that would normally have already fired up the intellect at the ordinary level, everything you do is in some way secondary, such as I was pointing out in a different way when we ended last time, that you might think that there are secondary sources of reference, such as a man decides he wants to be big and strong, or a woman decides, I want to look like whoever. And so a guy has this photograph. He uses a scale, this big old blown photograph of Mr. America of 1991. And he looks at it and he tries to, do all that. That's not enough. That no longer would do it. To begin with, jumping in reality, that won't ever do it, because if a man did not have a secondary, he wouldn't be doing that anyway, but never mind that. What I was trying to point out last time, you might think if you had the ordinary mind and you were falling into this, you'd think, well, now, wait, you pulled out an example just to refute exactly what you said, because a man trying to get big and strong and look like Mr. America, and he's using this as a reference, we're talking about now something that is not secondary. If it were not secondary, if a man did not have a self-referring mind, that is, put it crudely, simply, if he did not have daydreams about what this kind of physical change will bring about, that if in some way you could have an ordinary man and you walked in and he had this thing and he was standing there pumping iron and looking at this, and you said, is that what you want to do? And he says, yes, that's my hobby in life. And you said, all right, what is it that you dream will happen when you look like that? And if he says, I've never thought about it. You realize that we're now dealing with Walt Disney and Looney Tune times. It's not possible. It is not possible. All right, I'll repeat it. It is not possible. If the man is looking at that, and if you said, well, is all you want to do is look like that? Yes. And then what? Nothing else. Not possible. The secondary is involved with it, not right or wrong. Again, it's just a hobby, but he has to be thinking. He has to be daydreaming about the implications, the payoffs that will come from looking like that. That's not to refute the fact that he might say, well, I enjoy the feeling of tearing up my cells and building it up. I enjoy that. It's good. That's a hobby. But that is not the standard. It is not silent physical external source of authority of him looking at that. It's not that it is not involved at all, but if it were just that, he would not be looking at it. It would not be a source of authority. He would not be trying to emulate that kind of appearance. The secondary has to be involved. Now, what's this? Back to where we were. Well, it's impolite to do that. Back to where we were. In man's secondary life, which is what we're talking about now, although the primary is there, But that is not what drives ordinary man. That is not sufficient. That your connection to the secondary world, ordinary man's connection to the secondary world, is always more verbal than actual. I didn't say instead of. Now remember that. Well, we're just in the same area as trying to talk about how the secondary, as we're calling it, is connected with the primary. It's not that it's replaced it. It's not that it's better, and you cannot cut it off. You know, I can do all this and draw my little charts and talk about drawing a line here, and you can't do it. It's suicidal. It is, God forgive me, some kind of continuum. Isn't that what they say in science fiction now? It is a gradual process. You cannot any longer, in any way, you cannot separate the smell of the rose from a lingering aroma of fertilizer. Well, at least I didn't say fruit. Dung. You can't do it. See, it's not right or wrong. And so you cannot separate man's secondary world. I don't care if it's an Einstein. I don't care. Whoever would appear to be the epitome of sophistication, artistic, etc., etc. Even to the point that it seems as though they have ignored their physical body, etc., etc. But you cannot separate it from the primary. They're not simply a walking around cerebral cortex. There is no such thing. So we're talking about a continuing gradual process wherein one cannot be separated from the other. Now back to, I told you not to do that. Back to what we were talking about. It's not that one's replaced the other. It's not that one is right and one is wrong. It is simply, as I put it, that in man's ordinary connection to the secondary world, his verbal connection is more so than his actual. That doesn't matter if a man's got a little actual, that one man's attending temple over here once a year, once a week, and somebody is doing it faithfully. It doesn't matter. The one who's only going to church once a year, the one time a year Christian, can be experiencing the same kind of payoff at the ordinary level as a man who goes to church 3 times a week. I assume a Baptist, who else goes to church? Who even has church? At any rate, the connection is verbal. Because the man who only goes once a year, a man who says, yes, I'm a Christian. Yes, I'm an American through and through, by God. You ever voted? Nope. Did you serve in the war? Nope. Would you? I don't want to answer that. You think, well, this man is some kind of sunshine patriot. It doesn't matter. He can be getting the same kind of payoff because I'm just using these extreme examples. And it's not limited to that. It's just that I love to pick on extreme examples because they have such a small lobbying group that we can kick them around. The verbal connection to the secondary world is more important, is more efficient, is of more operational pertinence than a man's actual connection. Do any of you still believe, I ask rhetorically, that there is still some sort of contest, some sort of struggle between the world of action and the world of words? Do any of you still believe that? If you're ordinary, of course, and everybody's ordinary somewhere, the answer is, well, sure. Only those of less sophistication and insight haven't noticed that. Another major breakthrough for you, the ordinary mind. Only now, hate to say, only now, somewhere between 5,000 and 6,000 years behind. Yes, but I discovered it for myself. Good going. That's like everybody discovers death. Are you going to feel better? Yeah, well, sure, I've heard about it, but it didn't mean anything until now I hear the sound of that bullet coming toward me. There, if you recall, is the test by one guy's definition a few days ago in a Kyroots of real sophistication. Would be a man who can hear almost anything and not be upset except for the sound of a bullet headed his way. Which is kind of a cutoff between the physical, between, again, the primary and the secondary. that, well, perhaps it is time to be a bit upset. You know, it's the dirty mother grabber that would shoot me. In the split second you have to realize that bullet is coming right toward me, and there is no way that I can physically move my head fast enough to keep from it taking delivery of that fine-looking, clean, whirling .38 special. Like, the idea of there being a struggle, the little dramatic sarcasm is out in life, not just with academic philosophy. And all the churches, temples, synagogues, everywhere, ordinary people, people even arguing over what's going to happen between, if it gets down to it being the Oilers against the Mets. Hey, they got some strange games going on. At any rate, there's always people who won't discuss things, and one person will come up with another idea that, wait a minute, what you're talking about now, you are beginning to divide your descriptions and your verbal take on the matter from the physical realities of it. That is, that there is still some sort of contest between, some sort of struggle between the world of the Word and the Word and the world of action. That question is too, I must say, is too old hat to even consider. Therefore, I shan't. Back to where we were, as that man's ordinary connection to the secondary external world and all its activities is always more verbal than physical. Once you see that, then, or thus, make that thus, contrary to popular belief, which Kyroots already brought up and which is awfully tempting to go off on the side, but at least this much, thus contrary to popular belief, which referring to contrary to popular belief, which is always the case in any case where the matter is important. I'm glad I took out that time to help clear up the Kyroots. Contrary to popular belief, which is always the case in any case where the matter, the belief, is of any importance. Huh? Are we going to redefine thankless task? Or perhaps just individual folly? Contrary to popular belief, contrary to popular collective belief, it really should be, which is what it is, there is nothing unhealthy about normal hypocrisy. That is where I was going to wrap up, asking if any of you still believe that there was any sort of struggle, that there was a reasonable, pertinent, meaningful question involved with what ordinary people, I'll accept the word, they know what they're saying, the ordinary mind operating on those good two pillars of this and that, up and down, right and wrong, Don't any more of you Norwegian philosophers write me. I couldn't help it. One time I was frightened while I was traveling through Madison, Wisconsin, and I never got over it. What ordinary people call hypocrisy, of course, is the basis. Well, is a reflection of this continuing belief, which you've got no choice. I call it a belief. I don't mean that some sort of an ill-founded illusion. The belief in hypocrisy is the same basis from which your local financial backers are able to franchise your own version of Captain Irony. It is the reality behind all forms of sarcasm, cynicism, is the basis that the mind operates on a polarized basis, and that whatever you're going to believe, you already have to believe half of what you believe to not be true. And so therefore this idea that there is a struggle between people saying one thing and doing something else, it's no struggle. All it is a vibrant display that they are healthy, that they are alive. There is no such thing as an ordinary human who is not a hypocrite. I'm using their terms now, that's not mine. That is, if they are alive, if they are healthy, if they are sane, they are hypocritical. Because this operates on a polarized basis. There is nothing unhealthy about normal hypocrisy. The idea to say, well, that man says that he is a Christian. He says he is a good, patriotic American. He says that he is whatever. And I'm telling you, I have seen him behave in such a way to belie that. Well, we've proven one thing if we accept this person's word, that the man is alive and healthy. May I assume that none of you will get all carried away and decide to start the pro-hypocrite society. Stick with the pro-Mozartis Scarlatti. No need to encourage people. They do not need it. But there is nothing unhealthy, there is nothing untoward whatsoever about normal hypocrisy. It's not just, if you want to take it a little bit further, it's not just, yeah it is, the polarized basis of energy that runs the mind, but I was going to expand and say there's another way to increase your view of it. It has to do with the fact that the mind does not operate from an individual conception. The people are not being fueled by some pool of individual thought. It got started, as we've already established, by collective. And so if you're being run, if you were ignited by the collective pool of thought, then you have no recourse whatsoever, rather than to constantly be checking, referring to, bouncing off of, pushing against the external sources. So on that basis, you have no choice that half the time you're a hypocrite, or in half of what you do, you're a hypocrite. And what you think, half of it has to be what you don't think. But it apparently, the way it makes people become such sitting ducks to a kind of collective tango, Apache dance, that is, the attack on one another for being hypocrites, is that half of what anybody believes they can't do. I'm just using an easy figure. That the world's most Christian person, the world's most patriotic person, is at least in half a traitor, an infidel. There is no choice. It's not open to question. Except the ordinary people, they can want to sit around and discuss it. But hell, they were discussing something before they heard this. But it's not open to any question, much less is it any source of embarrassment, any position that must be defended. That is, to say to a man who says, I am a sincere, serious Baptist, Muslim. He is in half an infidel, a traitor to whatever he says he is. Or else he's not the thing. The connection is, the supreme connection is verbal, not actual. Back to, I just did it real fast when we started, that the verbal identification with these external sources, these external institutions, can be itself sufficient in any individual case with a minimal or no actual involvement. If you want me to push a little further, and don't worry about people out there, instead of talking about a Sunday Christian, somebody that goes to a church once a week, or a Christmas Christian, somebody that just goes once a year, or they used to call them funeral Christians. You only went to church in some parts of the South and somebody died. Either you or somebody else was the only time you went to church. So, but you can carry it further and say, well, all right, this kind of person, their connection, they just say, I'm a Christian. You go, how can you say that? In your family, aren't you Methodist? Yeah. Well, there's only one Methodist church in town. I go there. Yeah, I know you do. I've been going there. I go every Sunday. I haven't seen you there since your father died 8 or 10 years ago. Well, I guess you're right. Well, how in the hell can you say you're a good Methodist? The guy said, well, I am. And you said, well, you're not. You know, and it burns my religious ass up to have people... I'm sure somewhere in the Bible, you know, they condemn hypocrites. You can shake your finger and make your voice quaver like... The connection is verbal. So we could say in this case it was minimal. The guy only goes when somebody dies. But it could be even, I just wanted to show you that it's not tied to the physical reality. I'm talking about the guy only goes, that one person goes to church X number of times a year and no one goes X to the 10th power. Well, X times 10. It might not even be that. What I want you to see is it is possible that a person could say that they could question him. If you didn't catch it, I know it was vague. That tonight in a Kyroot, a man when questioned said yes, yes, and double yes again, and after that they left him alone. You could have a man, this doesn't happen in life, but here's the reality of it. You could have someone in life that in some way it was to his, even if he didn't know what he was doing, he's just there in the midst of the flow, out there in the middle of a dance floor somewhere in some locale, and people are talking about this and that, and everybody's a Baptist or a Christian, and they're all saying yes, and he's a stranger, and they say, well, I assume that you're a Baptist or a Methodist, and he goes, oh, yes. Yes, I am. And let's say that now the man has never been to church. He may even know what a Baptist he's named. Sure, he just knows, well, everybody else is saying they are, so he says, oh, yes, yes. Now, see, ordinarily, if we were just observing such as this, you follow what I'm saying? We're talking about a man now who says, he finds out everybody there is saying, yes, we are Methodists. And they look and say, we've never seen you before. Are you a Methodist too? Oh, yes. And he doesn't know what it is. Now, if this was ordinary and this was going any further, was in a movie or a novel or something, or if we were just ordinary people, we'd say, now, this is worse than hypocrisy. I mean, a hypocrite, at least, if a man says, yes, I'm a good Methodist, we find he only goes to church when somebody dies, we say, well, he's a hypocrite, which is, you know. But this man's a damn liar. Because we know, since I just made it up, he doesn't even know what a Methodist is. He just found that everybody there is... They're all saying Methodist, and suddenly they turn and look at him. We've never seen you before. He said, I'm an out-of-town Methodist. And so if we were ordinary people, probably like Methodists, we could say, the man's not, that's worse than a hypocrite, the man's a liar. It's got nothing to do with it. His connection can be just as valid. And you do know, but now we're not talking in any way about the Methodist church or any church. We're talking about the energy that runs humanity, that runs this. The verbal reference to external authorities and institutions may need to only be just that. That one time a guy says, under those conditions, or he might use it from then on, that served him well, and he stays around that same area, and any time I ever mention something about Methodists or anything, he nods right along. It worked once. It's not. Forget the scenario that he did it to weasel out of a bad situation or he did it to save his ass, which he might have done. But that's not it. I just wanted you to see an extreme example rather than a hypocrite. Here's a man that you could say, well, it has no validity. He just up and said, yes, I'm a Methodist because everybody else did. Man's connection, man's ordinary connection to the secondary world, to what goes on out there, is primarily always, whether it's this guy that just made it up on the spot, yes, I'm a Methodist, or those who go to the Methodist church twice or 3 times a week. They're physically there. There's no doubt about that. And he's never been, never will go. That's not it, though. The main function, the primary connection between everybody of an ordinary mind in the secondary world is verbal as opposed to actual. Not only then is there nothing whatsoever unhealthy, unsavory, questionable about normal hypocrisy. Contrary, if there would be any surprises anywhere, anything that would, really should make you raise an eyebrow, would be the times that there are as many people actually interested and involved in some secondary collective activity as claimed to be. You follow? Not that a person goes, it's hypocrisy. Get your eyebrow down, man. Straighten up. If there's anything to go, it'd be to run across somebody that doesn't even seem to be a hypocrite. Stay away from them. The person, probably weird. They're probably, escapee from a home. Or they're going to end up there. Find somebody who's not a hypocrite. If they're really good at being non-hypocritical, what are they? You want me to answer? We're out of time. They become a fanatic. They become worse than somebody who belongs to AA. I mean, the more you are anti-hypocritical, the closer you might get to being Papa Joe reincarnated. How about that? Mussolini lives. It would only be 2 minutes. It would only be a non-routine sort, such as what's it you call them? You're a revolutionist that might even have any real individual interest in. You've got 2 minutes, so 2 possibilities. Either in some way drawing closer together the realms of talk and action, or in some way just whizzing on past the whole question. And then we can finish it off and say, if you follow that, then, yes, back to the good old do it or forget it approach. How about a combination, since we're all Italian, a combination Pope and Mussolini?